All right, well, the United States Chamber of Commerce has filed a lawsuit challenging the Donald Trump-led administration's $100,000 fee on H1B visa petitions. The lawsuit filed by the chamber argues that the new visa fee is unlawful, saying that it overrides provisions of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which govern the H1B program. The chamber further said that the new fee would make it cost prohibitive for U.S. employers, especially startups and small and mid-sized businesses, to utilize the H1B program. Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the U.S. Chamber, has said that the program had been created by Congress expressly to ensure that American businesses of all sizes can access the global talent they need to grow their operations in the U.S. The chamber, which represents about 300,000 businesses, said that the group had backed Trump's proposals to attract more investments in America. However, it said that to support the growth, the U.S. economy would require more workers, not fewer. Let's talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Purnima Nath, Republican leader. Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert, is with us. Andrew Latham, professor of international relations, is also joining us from Minneapolis in the United States. And last but by no means the least, Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, with us on the program as well. Andrew, I'll begin with you. Well, you know, the H1B visa program, in more ways than one, has been the lifeline of a number of startups which are a part of our life today. You know, for example, Google, for example, Meta, for example, Microsoft. You know, these companies have used this program not only to attract talent, nurture it, put it into leadership positions, and take their companies to the stratosphere. And that's exactly why this program has worked for both the parties. What do you think Donald Trump had in mind, his administration had in mind, as an alternative to something which for so long, for decades, has been the backup of the American startup ecosystem?
And not just the startup ecosystem, but provision of healthcare professionals, nurses, for example. All sorts of people are recruited. This is the lifeblood, in a sense, of the American economy. The only answer I have on that particular question is that he's pandering to part of his base, which he does periodically. And then when he gets whatever mileage he can out of that, he typically backs off and tries to pander to another element of his base, because a big chunk of his base is in favor of H1B visas, right? Many of his personal friends and acquaintances, I'm sure, are in favor of them. But he has to consider the MAGA crowd as well. And they feel as if these foreign workers, of which I am one, by the way, are somehow displacing native-born Americans. Which is not true. This is an additive. As Professor Kohli, I'm sure, could tell us, being an economist, this is an additive process. Just because you bring somebody over on H1B visa doesn't mean you displace a domestic worker. It means you add all sorts of things to the economy. So politics as usual, pandering to his base. I rather suspect that he will shift, as he often does, on a variety of issues, from this position to a different position in the not too distant future.
Dr. Kohli, in fact, for decades now, highly skilled foreign workers have taken advantage of this. You know, with skill shortages in America, you know, H1B has come to the fore. It also has boosted economic growth. It attracts, you know, top talent, which of course America has utilized not only in the technology or the health sector, but also, you know, in the space sector. It's done wonders. You know, for agencies like NASA. But, you know, there has not been much resistance so far to what Donald Trump has proposed. In fact, there were telltale signs of him, you know, actually doing something like this in his first tenure as well. But he's finally done it. Do you feel that it's the American ecosystem of business and economy and startup that will suffer the most? India will find some other avenues. In fact, this is going to be a reverse brain drain for us.
Good evening, Vineet. To you, my fellow panelists, and the Newsx viewers. Well, suicidal is the word I would say. I'm not sure how much of the lobby of Republicans he's trying to, you know, appease, for that matter. You know, I'm trying to bring back the jobs to America. They've been snatching away your jobs and so and so. But the fact of the matter is, if you take out these techies from America, and I'm not spanning out to too many companies. I'm just talking of Alphabet. I'm talking of X. I'm talking of Amazon, I'm talking of Microsoft, and probably I'm talking of a few other larger organizations. Well, today, if they are global organizations, it's only and only because of the tech minds who have been, serving them for a very long time. I mean, the whole innovation has come from India. In fact, in India, we used to always speak that if these guys can go and do innovation in America, what if these guys should stay back? We used to keep talking of brain drain here, that those brilliant minds from IITs and IIMs and some of the other institutions, they just go and settle down there for the sake of a few thousand or a few $100,000, and they decide to never come back, and so on and so forth. And here is a president who's disregarding the fact, disrespecting the fact that if these corporations today are global corporations, it is because of these tech minds. Look at the medical sector in America. If you take out the Indian doctors from there, not many people know, I think the American health, the whole ecosystem will not function half as efficiently as it functions now. These are just two examples, tech and medical. You look at so many other sectors, Vineet, which are completely and absolutely some of the wealthiest people in America. I think Indians are counted on that. Some of the most successful people in America. Well, there must be something good that they must be doing to themselves and the country. Some of the biggest taxpayers in America are Indians. I mean, I just fail to understand that how a core businessman, he's a realtor. I mean, I consider him as a businessman of a different kind. He's a realtor. He can make a big building, he can make a Trump Tower, or he can make a golf course or whatever. But to understand the pulse of every kind of business, I somehow feel that I think there is difference of miles in comprehending the way businesses are run. And if these chambers have filed a suit because they know, and the biggest question of all, I'm sure Andrew, Purnima, who are right now in America, they would like to answer this question, that does America have a talent pool to replace these techies? And surprised, my research says, I have an economic research team which constantly analyzes the global economy, the employment patterns, so many parameters. My observation says that they will find it very hard to reply. And this is the reason. It's not just the cost which is the reason. This is the reason why the chambers have moved the suit, because there is no talent. The people, I spoke to some of the people in America, they said, we are not used to doing these kind of tasks. So there is no talent. How is this going to be replaced? Did he think of that? So he takes a step, and then he wonders later on that when he comes to know about the repercussions, he realizes that, look, this is what I have done. And when people come crying, people start protesting, people come and say, no, you've done something totally wrong. This is going to harm us. And this is actually going to harm the American economy. I think America should be proud of the fact, I'm sure Andrew and Purnima will agree, that if today there's Meta, which is being used across the world, if there is Alphabet, these are global corporations of the size of so many large countries. The valuation of these companies today is equal to some of the biggest economies around the world, or maybe even bigger. Alphabet itself and Microsoft itself can probably, no country can compete. Top 5 economies, and I take $3 trillion. How many countries have $3 trillion of GDP? I think President Trump is just failing to identify that how these corporations over a period of time have grown in that size. It's a very sorry state of affairs, and he knew that 70% of these visas are taken by Indians. Now, I have a new fear, Vineet. Every time he calls Prime Minister Modi my great friend, India is a great country. He's doing a fantastic job at the top, sitting at the top. He's doing a wonderful. And following this comment, there's always a missile fired. I meant an economic missile, which is fired on India. So every time he calls him a friend, it makes me paranoid that, look, something's going to come tomorrow, because I think he laces it with his friendship and then fires it the next day. So I don't relish that statement of friendship being made on any public platform, wherever he makes it from. Affairs, America is going to regret. I'm telling you, is going to regret if these H1B techies stop pouring into the US. Vineet.
All right. Purnima, what do you have to say about how the H1B is going to change the landscape that has made America great already. It is still, the strongest economy in the world. It still has, the mightiest, defense structure. It envies. It's the envy of everyone, including China, when it comes to most agencies in terms of their proficiency, their depth, and their reach. Is Donald Trump doing the opposite of what MAGA stands for? And another thing that comes to my mind, which is very recent, is that he was very confident when he said that India has agreed to stop buying oil from Russia. There is no talk of that here. There's no proof of that over here. There was never a call. He's just made this up on his own. Isn't that a very dangerous thing to do for a president? You just cook up things which don't exist. He's also taking a lot of pride in the conflict that he's resolved between Israel and Palestine and Hamas. But the fact of the matter is that people are being killed ever more than before in Gaza at this point in time. There is actually a palpable feeling that the hostilities are going to return. It's only a matter of days.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. First of all, I want to bring your attention to one point Kohli mentioned. Indians are very successful in this country. And I think
most successful. The average income of the Indian household is the highest as compared to any other immigrant family.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's statistics about it. And we're not bombing buildings. We're not hijacking flights. We're not beheading people on the street. We're not communicating or advocating for violence either. We're very focused on the education. We are into universities. We are writing. We are doing our jobs. And we're just focused on our children, home. That's it. We don't care about politics. How many people are actually, from an Indian background perspective, is involved in politics? And then somehow I became involved in the Republican side of it. And I got a lot of flack from the Democrats as well. Oh, they're going to throw you out one day. I knew exactly what was coming, and they said this party is racist. I said, no, let me experience it, and we can change my opinion based on my lived experience. If that happens ever, it ever has to happen. But here, the reason that Indians are being singled out and targeted is because of the fact that Indians are actually successful. Remember what happened to the Jews in Europe. They were thrown out. At that point of time, what was their population? 1%, 1 to 2%. Remember what happened to the Indian population in Uganda in 1972? Because of the Indian population, successful Indian population, what was the population at that point of time in Indian population in Uganda? 1%. They controlled 95% of the supply chain and businesses. And they also were thrown out, and they've taken the decree, the royal decree, the presidential decree came across that they had 3 months to leave. They were allowed to take 128, I suppose, dollar, and also they were their properties were seized. Their businesses were seized. They were ousted from that country within 90 days. This is exactly what we're going to face over here. Listen, because I'm brown, because I'm Indian origin, somehow I don't belong in Republican Party. Somehow I'm not a MAGA. Somehow I'm not a America First, because I speak for the H1B or Indians or immigration. This country was built on immigrants. The European that came to this country, they were not native of this country, but somehow we are not quote unquote American. Somehow we are filthy. Somehow we are branded as scammers, fraudsters. We are actually taking their jobs away. These are the narrative they communicated about the Indian community in America. And the danger is that, unfortunately, Republican Party, who actually kept saying they are not racist, Republican Party, who actually kept saying that, yes, we're going to take everybody and embrace everybody, even if they don't look like themselves, they are the one who's creating that. And the MAGA people have become a cult at this point of time. It doesn't matter what policies he actually talks about whether it's H1B, tourist visa increment that they talked about, $250 he imposed visa integrity fee. Who's going to come in this country? Our infrastructure is falling. Did you see New York JFK airport? Did you see the infrastructure here and the roads? We can't even go anywhere. Every single day there's some construction. And the fraud, the fraud that is happening in this own country by the so-called white Christian nationalist is a phenomenon over here, and then nobody talks about it. Indians are 1.1%. Somehow we are the scammers. Indians are 1.1%. Somehow we are taking their jobs away. Indians are 1.1%.
Okay, I see your point. I see the point that you're making. I want to bring in Aditya here as well. In fact, Adit, I remember when Joe Biden was in office, he did take out that $1 trillion budget for upping the American infrastructure. And I did go to New York a couple of times in the last year, and I remember how JFK was under construction, and perhaps by the time I go there later this year, it will be ready. But the point is that President Trump is more focused on undoing what Obama and the Democrats stood for than constructing his own ideal situation and incorporate some of the good things that the Democrats did for the American people. It seems to be a complete contrast of what the Democrats have been doing. In fact, most of his chatter is about how the Democrats made the mistakes that he's still cleaning up. This is not good for America. This is not good for the Americans. Obviously, he has a lot of sycophants around who toe the line that he has to preach, but that's not going to work.
Vineet, I think, if we extrapolate the conversation or the discussion that we've had with Purnamadi, with Professor Latham and Dr. Kohli, I think the one thing that is obvious is that the Indians are going to have a target pinned on their back because of these Trump policies, these Trump madness. And, he is basically catering to a certain sector or certain electorate within America, which is very insular, which is very inward looking, which is very myopic, doesn't recognize that there is a wide world out there and doesn't believe in coexistence. But coming back to this particular case that's happened with the H1B, I think the Chamber of Commerce's involvement, I think this is something which is very stark, and I didn't expect it to come, for this to come so swiftly, because it sort of marks a very rare public rift between the conservatives and the big businesses. The big businesses which have historically backed Republicans. They've had historical alliance. And without the sort of involvement of the Chamber of Commerce in this particular litigation, it was more likely that the Trump administration would have deflected this case, which is originally filed by the Global Nurse Force, I think they're called, as left-leaning, or maybe something which was engineered by the Democrats. But now that they have a consolidated backing of the Chamber of Commerce, which is represented by 300,000 businesses. Dr. Kohli mentioned Alphabet, Amazon, and all of these businesses are primarily those businesses which actually have interest in the H1B, which want the H1B as a legal recourse to hiring talent all across the world, just not India. And they want to ensure that America continues to be that center of innovation, that center where competitive edge is provided on the basis of what skill set you have. So I'm very perplexed. It happens so swiftly, but I'm glad that it did. But there's a very minuscule part of me which actually says that all of this, which was engineered a month or so ago, was actually calibrated populism, where Trump would basically throw in this grenade of chaos and then pivot back, as even Professor Latham, I think, accrued to, that he would essentially pivot back to blaming the judiciary, the Democrats, and the big cops, saying that they are the ones who stopped me from bringing jobs back to the American people. So the hurdles are a lot. 70 to 80% chances are that this particular H1B will face an injunction in early January, and by mid next year, or hopefully by the end of 2026, it'll probably be thrown into the dustbin.
All right, Andrew, what do you make of what Adit said? And of course, and what does this mean for the American people as well? all these tariffs, these blockades and impediments eventually, at the end, will have a bad impact on what the Americans take home and how much taxes they pay and where their taxes are made to work.
Yes, I think objectively, the consensus of the panel and the consensus of the country really is that H-1Bs net are good for the United States, good for prosperity, good for opportunity, good for our standing in the world. But politics always rears its ugly head, but so does the Constitution and the law. And this is one of those battle spaces between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Right now, one of the big issues around this H-1B lawsuit is that the executive is overstepping its constitutional authority. That Congress passes the laws and the executive branch, the president and the federal agencies, execute the laws. They don't make the laws up. Now, some decades ago, there was a court case called the Chevron case at the Supreme Court that gave a great deal of deference to the executive branch. The legislative branch wrote very vague laws, and then the executive branch made up all the details and the rules. But that was thrown out by the Supreme Court a few years back. And that means that the executive branch has far less latitude to pursue these kinds of, they would call them tweaks, but they're not tweaks. They're rewriting the law unconstitutionally. And so quite apart from the real issues about racism, about shooting yourself in the foot economically, there are these legal and constitutional and deep political issues at play here as well, which I'm sure President Trump has no idea about.
All right, Dr. Kohli, your thoughts on whether this is something that can be mitigated, as all things are up for mitigation when it comes to Donald Trump. It's sunshine today, it's going to be rain tomorrow, and then snowfall the next day. He's as unpredictable as the weather in New Delhi nowadays. What do you make is going to happen next? Like they say in Hindi, it's like Gider Dhamki is what you call it. You aggressively immobilize your opponent by being extra ambitious and intimidating. Is that what Donald Trump is doing?
Well, I don't know if somebody is looking to start a law practice in America. I think it'll be a great idea to become his barrister, because you're going to be in for a lot of business. Look at the number of cases that he's got against him. There's a lot of money to be earned for somebody who wants to start a barrister's practice, and if you can somehow bag his account, I'm sure you're in for a lot of fee. Yes, I think very extremely unpredictable and extremely unforeseeable. And of course, the whole world knows what he is doing. And I mean, what surprises me most is that his approval rating is going down. Why isn't somebody in the White House telling him that, look, you are not a very popular leader as you were in the beginning of your tenure? When you became the president, you may be having 57, 58% approval rating. Your approval rating has gone down to 40% now. How come that perplexes me. How come he's not aware that this is not a populist decision that you're taking? Who's advising him? Who's advising him on principles of economics? Who's advising him on principles of diplomacy? And above, who's advising him on principles of politics now? That if you want to be in office, you want to be a popular leader out there, you need to make sure that people are behind you rather than functioning for a small lobby of that MAGA wearing a red cap or whatever, the MAGA people do. I'm sure Purnima knows better how MAGA people move around with that red cap or whatever. But then that is what perplexes me. And it doesn't stop him at all. These approval, how come, Vineet, that these approval ratings are only visible to us? That startles me, if you ask me, Vineet.
All right, well, startling is the apt word among some of the other decisions that have come forth. Unfortunately, Adit, we have run out of time. Appreciate everybody who joined in and spoke their hearts out.